The use of occult numerology is undeniable in all these events, and for all those that don't know, numerology is a massive part of Freemasonry, as is the works of Pythagoras. If you wish to confirm this, you need only read Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, which is considered amongst many a Freemason to be almost a kind of Freemasonic Bible. So, does this mean that the Masons are responsible for this? Well, no. But what it does mean is that at least certain Freemasons at higher levels must at least have some sort of understanding of what is going on here, and it is a matter, in my opinion, of infiltrators within these societies, and not necessarily everyone in the societies, but certain elements as opposed to the whole group. The meaning of 9/11, regardless of whether it is a completely Masonically orchestrated or just Masonically inspired as opposed to orchestrated event, is evident. 10 is the hermaphrodite symbol, and it represents God, man and the universe. 9/11 equals skipping this. So 9/11 is only one of the number combinations used by the elites on that day, and there are many other highly significant numbers used on September 11th, and now we're going to explore these numbers and just what they mean in the world of the occult. So we'll have a look at the plane numbers here, and the numbers on the planes on September 11th 2001 were as follows. We had Flight 11, Flight 175, Flight 77 and Flight 93. Okay, so I'll divulge the meaning behind these numbers shortly, but first it is pretty important that we understand the history of a certain Aleister Crowley before the picture can start to fall into place. Aleister Crowley was born October 12th, 1875 in England to a devoutly religious family. Following the death of his father, he began to change, developing fantasies of torture and blood. These sadomasochistic tendencies grew stronger as he got older, gradually becoming more prolific. According to his own writings, he once caught a cat, poisoned it with arsenic, chloroformed it, hanged it above a gas jet, stabbed it, cut its throat and smashed its skull before burning it, submerging it in water and eventually throwing it out the window, all in an attempt to conclude whether or not it had 9 lives. Make of that what you will. He soon became fascinated with passages in the Book of Revelations concerning the false prophet, the Scarlet Woman and the Beast. His mother, concerned with Crowley's ever-growing dark side, would call him Beast, and he revelled in this, eventually identifying himself as the Beast 666. Crowley went on to progress in mathematics, English, literature, Greek and Latin. While travelling around Europe and studying Russian, he had an experience in Stockholm that would permanently change the course of his life. On New Year's Eve, 1897, he was asleep in his hotel room, but not asleep. According to his writings, he was awake while sleeping, but he was not dreaming, and he became aware of something inside of him that was terrifying yet pure and spiritual. As a result of that experience, he became an adept of the arcane and dark arts. It was Crowley's belief that he could become immortal and control the secret forces of nature through his own will, and as a result he began to dabble in magic rituals with his friends. On the 18th of November in 1898, Crowley became a neophyte of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and rose through the grades with ease. His dealings with dark magic and demon summonings aroused the suspicions of other Golden Dawn members, including the head of the order, Samuel Liddell Mavis. Mavis was a master Freemason who had spent years translating a famous book on magic titled The Key of Solomon, and he was the author of a book entitled The Kabbalah Revealed, which he translated from the Jewish Zohar. Crowley purchased an estate overlooking Loch Ness, where he intended to perform a 6-month magical working called the Abramelin, which invokes endless amounts of demons. He left, failing to cleanse the place, after receiving a letter informing him that he would not progress into the Second Order of the Golden Dawn. However, he was later on initiated despite this, and he became a full Adeptus Minor, much to the dismay of various other members of the Order. Crowley's time with the Golden Dawn came to an end after many a dispute, leading to his ejection by the police. Crowley then took off for Mexico, where he continued to dabble in magic and appointed himself as an Adeptus Major and was initiated as a 33rd degree Freemason. In 1903, Crowley married Rose Edith Kelly, who was the sister of his friend Gerald Festus Kelly. Gerald Festus Kelly was not at all happy with this. In 1904, Crowley and Rose travelled to Egypt under the pseudonym of Prince and Princess Kiowa Khan. While in Egypt, Rose became pregnant and they took an apartment where Crowley built a temple with the room facing north, and together they continued with the Abramelin working. Rose one day went into a trance and brought down a message for Crowley. "He is waiting for you, him, the god of war, the son of Osiris, Horus." Following this, she led him to a museum in Cairo and showed him a 7th century BCE mortuary stele, known as the Stele of Ankh-FN Khonsu. This stele would later be revered in Thelema as the Stele of Revealing. Crowley was astounded because the exhibit's number was 666, the number of the beast. Taking this as a sign, Crowley followed the instructions that he had received through Rose in a trance state, that a new dawn was coming for mankind and he was to be the one to initiate it. He was told to go into his temple on the 8th of April at 12 noon and write down everything he heard. He did so, locking himself in his temple and writing for an hour solid, 3 days in a row. The entity that had spoken through Rose and dictated what to write to Crowley used the name Iwas. According to Crowley, Iwas was one of the secret chiefs and his guardian angel. The writings dictated by Iwas became Crowley's most famous book, the Book of the Law, or Liberal Veliges. The book tells of how a new order would follow, in which he would be the chief of that new order, along with his Scarlet Woman Rose. Crowley was aware of the coming new Ion and knew that Horus symbolised force and fire and would start by plunging the world into a violent, bloody and catastrophic war. In the year 1912, Crowley joined the Ordo Templari Orientis, or the OTO, and he became the Grand Master of the English-speaking section. On April 14th, 1920, Crowley founded the Abbey of Thelema, along with Leah Hersick, who was Crowley's Scarlet Woman at that time. The object of the Abbey of Thelema was to devote themselves, the inhabitants that is, to the great work of discovering the true will. The religion of Thelema is based on the writings of the Book of the Law. Crowley's influence is and has been extremely far-reaching. One of his disciples was rocket designer Jack Parsons, who has a crater on the dark side of the moon named after him by NASA. Parsons was head of the California branch of the OTO and would perform sex magic rituals at his Pasadena house and initiate fellow scientists at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Laboratory. Los Alamos was the explosion site of the world's first atom bomb. Parsons baptised himself Armilius Antichrist Al-Dajjal in 1948. One of Parsons' disciples was Scientology funder L. Ron Hubbard. For more on this and how Parsons and Hubbard performed a dark ritual called the Babylon Working in the Mojave Desert, watch Enigma TV's Antichrist Conspiracy. In 1924, a young socialite by the name of Pauline Pierce, the wife of Marvin Pierce of the McCall Corporation, travelled to France to meet her friend Nellie O'Hara. Nellie O'Hara and the man she lived with, Frank Harris, were at that time living with Aleister Crowley. By now, Crowley had declared himself an Absissimus, which relates to being higher than the gods, and was about to partake in a sex magic ritual relating to his grade as an Absissimus. It is more than likely that his assistants for the ritual were Nellie O'Hara and Pauline Pierce. Pauline Pierce returned to America in early October 1924. 8 months later, she gave birth to a girl named Barbara. Barbara Pierce went on to marry George Herbert Walker Bush, who became the 41st President of the United States, and then their son, George Bush, became the 43rd President of the United States. Crowley eventually died in the year 1947 on December 1st while living in Hastings, England. At his funeral, in a non-denominational chapel in Brighton, his most famous poem was read out, the Hymn to Pan, along with excerpts from his Gnostic Mass. Now that we have very briefly outlined Crowley's life, we can examine the 9/11 plane numbers and discern exactly what all this means as relates to the 9/11 ritual.